I have spent over 60 hours building AI applications using Windsurf, and I can tell you now it is the best AI coder there is. In this video, I'll explain exactly why that is and show you different examples of applications that I have built, going through step by step of how I built them and how to deploy them. First, starting with a very simple invoice analyzer. So we allow users to upload documents and then select all the different elements that they want to extract from the invoice, and then have the option to download the extracted information as JSON or CSV files. And then we'll be taking it up a notch, building a content repurposing micro SaaS application, fully complete with user authentication, Supabase integration, tokens usage and tracking, and also Stripe integrations for payment. And not only that, we'll also be looking at how we can actually deploy these applications so that they're live for users to actually interact with. And finally, I'll also be showcasing an MVP application that I built for a client, and this is a real-time translation messenger, again fully complete with user authentication, searching and adding of contacts, and real-time messaging and translations of every message. And finally, I'll also be covering 10 of the best practices and tips that I've learned along the way from working with Windsurf for the past few weeks. And if you're new to the channel, hi, my name is Ahmed. I was a machine learning engineer. Now I'm a generative AI engineer and founder of Agenix AI, where we help businesses implement these generative AI solutions and automations. I also have a school community where I share all the different resources, the templates and the code for every solution that I share with you guys. We also have a weekly Q&A sessions where people hop on and ask different questions and share different insights. So if that sounds like something that you might be interested in, it'll be the first link down in the description below. So with that being said, let's get started with the masterclass. So I've created this document here with over 50 different pages of step-by-step instructions, all the different codes and prompts that I've used to build out these different applications. It goes through everything, not just how to use Windsurf, but also setting up of Supabase, setting up of Stripe, and also for the first application, how we can set up Azure Document Intelligence for the extraction of the different fields from the invoice. And if you want access to this, it will also be in the school community, and I'll leave a link to that down below. So like I mentioned before, these are the things that I'll be covering in this video. We'll start off by looking at Windsurf, how it works, why we should use it, and why it's the best, especially if you're an agency owner building different GenAI solutions for customers. We'll be looking at all the different features of Windsurf, the concepts and capabilities, and what differentiates it from all the other AI coders out there. And then we'll cover the step-by-step instructions of how to build the applications, the invoice analyzer, the content repurposing application, and then we'll be deploying and hosting one of these applications. And then I'll be giving an overview of the client application that I built, the real-time translation messenger. And finally, I'll be covering the best practices and the different tips and unique insights that I've learned from using Windsurf in the past few weeks. So what is this new IDE that's taking over the space, revolutionizing how we work with AI and build full-stack applications? So the company behind it is called Codium, and they've been around for a while now. So they actually started off as a simple code completions extension that you can add onto your VS Code, for example, and it just helps developers code faster. However, now they've released Windsurf, which is essentially the first AI agentic IDE, and they've built this on top of the VS Code because VS Code is open source. So it looks very similar to Cursor and VS Code, but the backend is powered by agents and co-pilots, and so they work and collaborate with each other. And this is why Windsurf is unique. So they've released Cascade, which combines the deep understanding of the code base from their original context awareness engine and giving advanced tools and real-time awareness of the different actions so that we can have a seamless, powerful, collaborative flow. And this is some of the features that it has that makes it really unique. It really does create an experience where it's almost like working alongside a developer, collaborating on a project. It maintains continuous understanding of your actions. So every time you do an update, it actually gets updated. So it keeps track of everything that you do. It has the deep understanding of the entire code base, again, using the contextual awareness engine that they had before. They've got an LLM-based code search, so it's 3 times more accurate. And at the bottom here, we've got some of the benefits for the developer experience. And on the right, we have the different tools and integrations that it has access to. So up until recently, Windsurf didn't actually have the ability to upload images like Cursor does. But now with the latest update, they've actually released this. So now we have the ability to add images and tell it to tweak the UI, for example, or build whole new applications based on images of different UIs that you like. And another cool update is the one from Anthropic, where they're introducing a model context protocol. Essentially, it's a new standard for connecting AI systems to different content repositories, business tools and development environments. And this should improve the output of the models, especially when it comes to code generation. And I've actually partnered up with Windsurf, so we should start to see the improvements real soon. So first up, we have the doc analyzer, the invoice analyzer. And let's first actually see in action, show you guys a demo before we jump in and understand how to actually build it step by step. So starting off, we have a very simple application here, and we're essentially just able to upload PDF files of a invoice. So here I've got a sample invoice. We upload this. So we have a PDF viewer. We're able to scroll and look at the invoice that we've uploaded. And then on the right hand side here, we have to define the different fields that we want to extract. So here I'm just going to extract 3 different variables We have the customer name, the vendor's name, the subtotal, and we'll see if it does this okay. And in the backend, it's essentially using Azure's document intelligence, which analyzes the PDF file and then extracts all the entities here. So we can see the customer name is test business, which is correct. Vendor's name is sliced invoices, which is also correct. And then the subtotal is $85, which is all correct. And then we're able to download the data as JSON file or a CSV file. And then we just simply click save and that gets saved into our files. As you can see, it's very simple. However, something like this will take actually weeks to build if we're doing it from scratch. Whereas using something like Windsurf, we're able to create something like this within hours. Right, so now let's see how we got to this stage and look through all the different steps that we took to build out the application. So what I want to start off with is the steps to creating the Azure account, which is what we'll be using to extract the data from our PDF files. And it's actually quite simple and doesn't require too much work. So what we have to do is start off by creating an account. So we go to the link of portal.azure.com and create an account. And for all the new users that sign up, you actually get a $200 credit to use for all the different services that they offer. I won't cover the actual creation of a new account, but it's fairly simple and straightforward to set up. But once you have that completed, you'll see a page like this. So this is the dashboard of the Microsoft Azure. You have all the different services that they offer. The only one we're concerned about is the document intelligence service. And to create this, you might not see this at the top here. So you just have to create new resource and then just do a search for document intelligence. And the one that we want is the form recognizer. So yeah, this is the one that we want. Click on it and then we're able to create a new service. And this is the page that it should direct you to. We select the default subscription. And then for the resource group, which is essentially just a group of different services that you want to keep together for one organization, you have to create a new one, but I have one set up for my agency. For the region, you have all the different areas where the service could be hosted from. And it's just good to pick one that's closer to you. So I'm going to do UK South for the one that I want. And then we have to give it a name. I'm just going to call it Doc Analyzer Demo. And then for the pricing tier, you should be able to see another option for a free tier if you created a new account. However, for me, I have to select the standard pricing tier. And if we want to quickly look at the different prices, so for the free one, you should be able to do up to 500 pages free per month. And then the cheapest paid tier is $1.50 for 1,000 pages for up to 1,000,000 pages. And then if it's above that, it drops down to 60 cents per 1,000 pages, which is not too bad. And next, we don't have to worry about all the different settings here. We can just jump straight to review and create. And then finally, you just click on create and that will deploy the service. However, I'm not going to do that because I have a demo here set up already. So once that finishes deployment, you'll see a page like this. However, if you don't, you can go down to resource management, keys and endpoint. And this is essentially where we'll be getting the API key. So we can just copy the first key here. And also we need the endpoint URL. And these are the two variables that we'll need later on to connect our application with the Azure service. And that's all there is to it. So like I mentioned, it's very simple. Once we have that set up, we're now basically at the stage of creating the application. So first we have to create the Next.js application. And you can do this by a simple command here. And you run this in your terminal, just copy and paste. And this creates all the folders and files that we need as a starting point when building these applications. We also have to install the library for Azure, and we do so using this command here. So copy and paste both of these, paste them into your terminal, and that should basically set up the basic structure and folders that we can then open up using Windsurf and start building our application. To speed things up, I've created a Windsurf prompt writer. This is a custom GPT within OpenAI's custom GPTs. And essentially all we have to do is paste in the overview of the application that we're trying to build. So let me copy that, paste it into here. And essentially all we're saying here, just giving a very high level overview of what the application does, how the users interact with the application. So they're able to upload their PDFs and then they specify the fields that they wish to extract from the invoice and run the execution. We then specify that it should also use Azure Document Intelligence Service to analyze the PDF and extract the data. And then the extracted data is shown to the user on the right hand sidebar. So we're giving it the basic layout as well here. And then users are able to also have the option to download the extracted data. At the end, we just want to mention the tech stack that we want to use. So here we're using Next.js 15, Tailwind, and Lucid icons. So we send that through. And then what it goes and does is create this instructions file. So this instruction file is basically going to be very key, and we'll always be referring back to it when we're building our application. So it creates a markdown file of the overview of the project, all the different core functionalities and features that we want. And it does this in a way that it builds up on each other, which helps us break up the application so that we build one feature at a time, test it, make sure it works before moving on and adding more. So for every feature, it has the description and it has very detailed steps of what it needs to do, how the layout looks, all the actions the users are able to take, and then the tech stack it needs for that specific feature. And then at the bottom, we also have the documents section. So this custom GPT doesn't actually include the different snippets. What I'd like to do is actually paste in the snippets of the documentations inside of the instructions file. And I'll show you guys that in a second. And this will really improve the outcome of the generations from Windsurf. At the end, we also have some important implementation notes that it needs to follow. So all we have to do is copy this file here, this markdown file, and then we open up Windsurf and open up the folder. So just go to File, Open Folder, and then select the folder that we just created using the terminal. And you should see a basic folder structure similar to this with a basic application, Next.js application. And the first step that we have to do is create a new file in the root directory here, call it instructions.md. And then we just paste in the file that we copied. Of course, here I've actually pasted in the final one because what you have to do is the output from the custom GPT won't be perfect. And I'd highly advise you to spend as much time as you can on this document here, because this is what the model will essentially use. We'll be referring back to this document when building out the application. So you want to spend as much time as you can here, making sure all the features are correct, all of the different steps are laid out in a way that you want, and some things you might want to take out or add in some new things and new elements. It's very important to get this absolutely perfect before we even start building out the application. And once you do that, you also want to make sure at the bottom here I've added snippets of the documentations from the different services that we're using. So the first one is for the Azure Document Intelligence. So I just pasted in a bit of information of what it is, what it does, and pasted in the exact code that they have on their documentations page. And this will really improve the output from the model. And we're just trying to minimize the errors that we get and just increase our chances of success without having to go back and forth, error handling and troubleshooting. And as you can see here, I've also included a schema for the pre-built invoice, which is the model that we use with the Azure Document Intelligence. So essentially how it works is that the model has predefined list of fields that it's able to accept. And these are the different fields that it will extract from the documents. So what we want to make sure is that the names are correct, the data types are correct. And the best way is to just paste in the exact schema that the documentation gives us so that we don't run into any errors when building this out. So I specified all the different fields, pasted that in. And this is actually what we use for the drop-down menu to allow the user to select the different fields that they want to extract from the document. And you might be thinking that this document is huge with over 450 lines, but essentially we just want to keep everything in one place and we'll only be implementing specific sections at a time when building out the applications. So once we have that all done and ready to go, we may finally go ahead and start building out the application. So the first thing we want to do is copy the first prompt here. So we've done everything here, and what we want to do is just copy this, and this is how we start. So we start by chatting with Cascade using the right hand side bar here. And if you can't see this, you just press Command L or Control L, and that should bring it up. What I'm doing here is basically just saying, I want to build out an Next.js application for analyzing PDF invoices to extract data. Users can upload invoice files, specify different fields for extraction, view the extracted data, and the app also leverages Azure Document Intelligence. What I'm basically doing is just copying parts of the overview here, just to really home in what we're trying to do. And then I tell it to read and strictly follow the instructions based on the instructions.md file. And then we're actually able to link that and make sure it goes and fetches the document. And then finally, I like to say I've set up the Next.js project already in the doc analyze folder. This is the original. So for this one, it'll be the doc analyze demo folder. Now let's build the first feature, and then I just specify the name of the exact name of the first core feature that we want to build out. And then we just enter. So it goes off, does its magic. As you can see, it first analyzes the instructions file, and let's just let this run for a little bit and then I'll come back. So one of the cool parts is that it has a tool that runs terminal commands. So we don't copy and paste it into our terminal. We can just do everything from inside of Cascade chat here. And even though it had errors, it's able to just read the errors automatically, go back and forth within itself without me having to do anything. And it already suggested that we need to use legacy peer dependencies. So we just have to click accept. And it really does feel like just collaborating with a developer. For example, just, going back and forth, telling a developer to do this task. It comes back, says, these are the errors. Sometimes it just figures out the errors and solves the problem by itself. And it really shows everything that it's doing, all the different steps that it's taken. It's very intuitive. So what I like to do is actually open up the application and test it, make sure all the new generated content is accurate and it's running correctly before coming back and accepting or rejecting the code that Cascade generated. So to do this, we just run this command in our terminal, npm run dev. So this just runs our application locally so we can test it. And we just have to go to localhost 3000 for this one, which I've got opened up here. Amazing. So the first core feature of the application was just a simple drag and drop of PDF files to upload them onto our app and then be able to view them as well. So let's open up the sample invoice and we have our first error. So, which is good. Let's go do some error handling. So what we have to do is copy the error, simply come back into Cascade, paste that in. You notice I still haven't accepted the changes. I'm just letting it know that there was an error and let's see what it comes back with. I see the issue, PDF is not properly. Accept. Just do your thing, man. I'm just here to observe. So it seems to be an issue with the libraries that it installed and the PDF worker. Right, so a lot back and forth and just, copy and pasting the errors back into the prompt, asking it to fix this. Essentially, the error was with the PDF worker. It wasn't set up correctly. And it also changed the look of the application, which is fine for now because we're not really worried about the UI at this stage. But finally, we have it working. So we're able to upload a PDF and also view it. So, yep, it's all good. And this is very basic. If you had multiple pages, we can go next or previous. So we have the basic functionality for the first core feature. Honestly, there wasn't much that I was doing. It was just a bunch of copy and pasting of the errors, exactly how they shown on the screen, paste it into here, and then it fixes the issues. And then at the end of all of that, once I was happy, I accepted the changes. And now we can see we have a bunch of new files and configurations that we've set up. And I think we're at this stage, we're ready to start the next feature. But before doing so, what I like to do is, once everything's tested and saved, and we know that the first feature is good to go, it's always good practice to commit the changes. So on this tab, we have the source control, and this is where we're able to connect with GitHub and commit the changes. So we upload all of our code onto GitHub and think about it like a checkpoint. So we can save the current work that we've done, upload it onto GitHub. That way, if we really mess up the code, we have a save point that we can refer back to and then try again. So what we have to do is just give it a message and hit commit. The first time you do this, you would have to publish the branch. So actually, the first time you do this, you have to connect it with GitHub. So it'll come up with a pop-up where you log into GitHub. And then essentially, the first time you upload a new project, we have to publish the repository. So we can either publish it as public or private. And then we just give it a name and then hit publish. This will go ahead and upload all of our files into the repository. So you can see here we have the first commit and we're at a good point now. Everything's safe. You can see there are no more changes shown on the folders and the files. And we can now go and copy the second prompt for our second feature. So another tip is that we have to always make sure we start a new chat whenever a chat window gets too long. This is because the context window gets filled up with all of this rubbish and all the errors, which we don't really want, and it can start to affect the performance of the model. And you probably have noticed this, like at the start, it'll be really good at generating code, but then the bigger the context window gets, the worse the performance is. So at every step, we want to create a new chat, paste in the second part of the prompt, which is basically, I'm just saying, continue building my Next.js application, very brief description, and then always referring back again to the instruction file, saying, this is the instruction file, make sure it's connected. And then we implemented the first feature. Now continue and implement the second feature, giving it the name. And this is a really key point as well. Please don't mess up the existing functionality, because what it really likes to do is just regenerate the whole code sometimes. So we just want to make sure it doesn't do that every time we start a new feature. So we hit send and now we wait and let it do its magic. So the second feature was the field definition interface. And he just finished creating the field definitions file, which has all the predefined fields that we want. And we can see here that it's not actually correct. So it needs a bit more prompting sometimes. So what I'm going to do is paste in this command. Could you add all the predefined acceptable fields that the model allows? You can find a complete list in the instructions file. So really making it very clear that it needs to use the instruction file specifically for this section, and make sure to include all the fields exactly as they're written with their correct field types. So this should hopefully prompt it even more to really check the documentation section at the bottom where it has the schema for the predefined fields. Amazing. So we can see that it went and actually did a good job of taking all the different fields with their right type and descriptions, which is cool. So I think that was the only thing we wanted for the second feature. And it looks like we also wanted to implement the drop down menu. So let's see if it actually did that. Let me just refresh. So as you can see, it works. It did the job. We have all the different fields exactly. We can add them and it shows it down below. It's just a very horrible UI. Usually I wouldn't really worry about this too much. However, because this is so bad, we want to improve it before moving forward, because once we start adding multiple features, it might get a little too messy. So I'll actually improve the UI before we move forward. First, I also just want to make sure that the upload feature still works. We always want to test everything at every step, you know, just so we make sure that we haven't introduced any new errors and everything that we previously done still works. So yeah, that's all good. That's all fine. It's just about the UI at the moment. So what I can actually just simply do is, now that we have the image upload feature, we can just upload this. So we add image, go to the bottom, add this one. So we add the screenshot in. I'm just going to say, so I'm not saying much. I'm just saying that the UI is terrible. Fix it. Also make sure not to touch any of the functionality and simply update the UI to be more user friendly. Let's see what that does. Right. And while it's doing that, we can also just really check the ones that is completed. Make sure it's only, so this part here where it says return, everything down here is like the UI. Everything above is all the functionality. So we just want to make sure, quick skim and make sure it's only, you know, modified the UI part of the code. And similarly here for the second one. This just added a new function to get the color, and yep, it looks okay. Has it finished? Oh wow, yes, much better. So we can see we have the upload here, the viewer at the bottom, and then we can add things here. Cool, nice touch. All right, so we can actually move on and accept all the changes, and we can start on the third feature, data extraction with Azure Document Intelligence. So let's copy the prompt. New chat. I've already went ahead and did the commit before updating the UI, so I'm not going to bother to do that again. So this part is good to go. It's the same prompt again, where this time we're just saying we've done the first two features, now continue and do the third feature. So it goes ahead, does its thing, analyzes the instructions, analyzes the page. And for this one, we want to set up the API to talk with Azure. We want to see the extraction results. We want to include a button to run the executions, loading spinner for the progress. And then here we have all the steps that it needs to take. Set up Azure, make an API route, use the environment variables, map the user defined field to the schema, implement error handling. So nice, well-rounded feature that we want to implement here. Let's see what it does. Right, so we created all of the different files that we need for this feature. Asks us to create the .env file. So let's just do that quickly. And it's where we store all of our environment keys and secrets. So we copy this or just insert it. And like I mentioned earlier, this is what we'll be using to connect our application with Document Intelligence Service. So we just need the endpoint and our key here, which I showed you guys where to get that from. And just let me go ahead and do that real quick. Cool. So that's in there now. And it also asked us to install some new libraries here. Just let it do that so we can save that. Because in this section, the only UI component is the run extraction. So let's just check. Okay, yeah, we have that. So we have the extract data button here. It's disabled because we don't have data. So let's add data on there, add a few of these, and then we can hit extract data. Amazing. Oh, it looks like we're actually also showing the data extraction. So it looks like we've actually implemented the fourth feature as well into the third feature, which is fine. But what I like to do is just actually make sure that it actually done this correctly. So I've got this prompt here, and essentially it's the same thing again. Continue with our application. I've already implemented the first three features, continue with the fourth one. And then at the end, I told it that most of this has already been implemented. Just make sure there's nothing missing. And I won't bother starting a new chat or committing changes because this is essentially the same feature here. We just want to make sure we've implemented everything. There's nothing missing. Test it, and then we'll do the commit to GitHub. Right, so it looks like there's a couple features that it wants to add. Let's see what it looks like. Let's add a file. Just want to make sure this is all works before moving on. Add another one. Extract the data. Nice. Looks, oh, and we can collapse the data as well. Perfect. Accept all changes. Now let's check this error that we have here. So what I like to do is just copy this section, whole section, into the chat, and then hover over where the error is, copy everything and paste that as well. I don't even need to say anything, like it already knows this is where the error is and this is the error. It knows we're looking at the route.ts because this is what's actually highlighted at the moment. So it's able to fix that automatically. Sometimes if you make changes to a file and you haven't saved it, you wouldn't be able to actually go ahead and implement the changes. So I just saved the file and come off it and just asked it to continue because it can't edit a file that hasn't been saved yet. So make sure it's always saved. Right, so you made a bunch of different changes. So let's test it, make sure it's still working and we haven't messed up anything. Oh, that's nice. It's even got a little information icon. Invoice ID, that's working. Amazing. Right, so we fixed all the errors. We can actually go ahead and just accept all of the changes that it made, accept all, and just make sure we've implemented everything for this stage. So yep, we have everything here. It's all working. We can finally commit the changes. So this is the third feature, which was display of extracted data. Sync the changes. Now we can go on to, which I believe, the final instructions.md, enter. And because this wasn't a really long chat window, we're able to just, add this very small feature at the bottom here in the same chat. So the final feature is the ability to download the data both in CSV and JSON formats. We can have the download button, convert the data into the chosen format. Then we're using blob and URL create object URL for the download functionality. And that will essentially be the final feature that we have to build. And then it's just about, customizing the UI, making sure it looks how we want it, maybe adding a logo and adding a style that we like. Right, it seems like it's completed everything. Let's run our application, upload a file, sample invoice, add a couple fields, customer name, invoice date, vendor name. I really like this. It's even better than the one I created initially. Extract the data. I like how, you can hover over the information icon and it gives you a bit of information about the data. Extract the data, invoice details, invoice date, other, customer name. It even splits it into different, groups of data, which is really cool. Let's download JSON file. Save that. And then download the CSV file as well, just to quickly see what that looks like. And what I'm just going to do is open them up inside of here actually. So customer name, test, invoice date, and then the vendor name. And for the JSON, we can drag this onto here as well. Very nicely put. Customer name, invoice date, and vendor name. So that's basically the whole application. So you can see how quickly we've actually spun this up. Of course, now we just have to worry about the UI of how it looks. And actually what I want to do, I want to try this. Let's see if this works. I'm just going to paste in the UI that I created. I'll just take a screenshot of this and I'm going to add it here. Let's first accept all the changes and there's no errors. So please update the UI to look like the reference image and make sure to not touch any of the existing functionality, only update the UI. Let's see if we can get it to look like the one that I've created. Right, so I finished updating all of the pages, pretty much every single component here. And it told us exactly what it did and the colors that it used. So let's see it. Moment of truth. Oh wow, that's very close. Super close to what I had. Let's just make sure it all works. Just gonna extract the customer name, see what it comes back with. But it really does look very similar to what I had before. Oh, there we go. Amazing. So when it comes to the deployment, essentially we'll have to do npm run build and make sure the app compiles and builds with no errors before we can save and commit to the repo. And then it will be ready for deployment. I'm not going to go through this for this application. I probably will do that for the second one, which I'll go over in just a second. Here I've also included the final instructions prompt, which you can just copy and paste. And this is the instructions.md file that we created earlier. And this is in the document. Right then, so next up we have the Social Scribe, which is a content repurposing application made to generate articles and social media posts for LinkedIn and X. And this one is a step up from the previous application because it has a lot more complexity and the features are a bit more involved, especially when it comes to integrating with Supabase, the Stripe integration, making sure we're tracking all of the tokens and making sure we're limiting users so that if they don't have enough tokens, we don't allow them to actually generate anything until they top up. So let's first start by showing you guys a demo and then I'll explain how I've built this application. Right, so here we've got the sign in page and we can either log in or we can create an account. if we're a new user. So let's create an account, and then we just hit create an account. So as soon as we create a new account, we have to go through an onboarding process. And this is where we capture all the details about the person's company, their brand voice, their target audience, and their content preferences. So I'm going to quickly fill out all the different fields with Airbnb's company in mind for the sake of the demo. Right, so I just finished completing the form with all the different information about Airbnb. So next we have the brand voice. This is to set the primary tone, the secondary tone, some voice characteristics. We also have the target audience. So here we set the primary audience, the demographics, the psychographics, and we can also add a secondary audience, but we don't need to at the moment. And finally, we've got the content preferences. And this is how we want the content to sound like. So the post type, the post style, the writing style, some key topics, content pillars, unique value proposition, and key differentiators. So once we complete everything, we can click create profile, and that should save our persona. So you can see the alert messages as well. And it takes us inside of the application. So we have a few tabs here. The first one is the persona tab. And this is where we can modify everything that we've just entered and make some changes and save the changes. Next, we have the article page. And this is where we input the content that we want to repurpose into our own. So we can have a topic name, and then we can put an article link, a YouTube link, or just paste in plain text. If you just have an idea, you can just type it in here. And let's try an example here. I have this random video about how to make money on Airbnb. So I'm going to copy this for the title, and then copy the link. And then we have to set this to YouTube link, and we can click generate article. So we have the loading screen, and this lets the users know something is actually happening. We're generating an article. And this is just good practice for any UI design. So let's just give it a second. Right, so I want you to pay attention to the success message here, and it shows us how many tokens we've actually used to generate this article, and we can get rid of that. So we have the article here. You can see it's really good. It's huge. I'm not going to read it, but essentially it has everything that we want. And basically the idea here is that we don't actually care about the article. I mean, we can if you want to put the article in like a blog, for example. If you want to create a blog for the website, you can use this article. But essentially we want to use the articles for the social media posts. So here we have a drop down menu from all the different articles that we generated, and this gets pulled in from Supabase. So as soon as we generate an article, that gets saved into our Supabase database, and then this drop down menu pulls in all the different articles that we generated. We select an article, and here we define the type of post that we want to create. So we can have something like, for this one, we can do tips and tricks. The style of the post, it could be problem solving showcase. The writing style, let's do educational. So first, let's see Twitter. So it's generating. Cool. We have a content here that we can just copy. Let's try a LinkedIn post. And then at the bottom again, you can see the tokens that we've used to generate it. And here we have the LinkedIn one. So this is the post that I generated for the LinkedIn. And of course, these are just for the sake of the demo and the project. And this can be improved by a lot. I just didn't really have the time to do so. So finally, we have the settings page. And this is where the magic really happens. So here we can see all of the different tokens, the available tokens that we have left. So when a new user joins, they get 10,000 free tokens, and we've used up 5,000. We can see how many we've purchased. And once we purchase tokens, we can see the bar showing us how much we've used in comparison to the amount of tokens that we've purchased. And then here at the bottom, we have the different packages. So it starts off at $5 for 50,000 tokens. We've got $15 for 250,000, and then $40 for 2 million tokens. And we can click on purchase, and this should take us to the Stripe page. Cool. So we're in the Stripe page now, and here we have the test mode for obvious reasons. Right. So we've entered our information here, and then we can just click pay, let it process. Amazing. And now we should redirect us back onto our settings page. So we can see here, payment successful. Your tokens have been added to your account, and we have a total of 54,000 tokens now. We can also try the Ultra just for the sake of the demo. There we have it. Now we've got 2 million tokens. Cool. So we also just have a logout button. You guys can't see that. So on the left hand side here, we have the logout button, and that just takes us back to the sign in page. Now you have an idea of what the app does and the capabilities. Let's actually dive into how we actually got to this stage and go through the different steps. For this one, because it's a bit more complex, I won't actually be building it from scratch, but I'll take you through all the different steps that I had to do to build it out. So we started off with the Windsurf prompt writer as usual. So I gave it a prompt. This time it was a bit more fledged out prompt because I really wanted to make sure we capture all the different details for, especially when it comes to the onboarding form. And then I told it about the different tabs that we have. So we've got the persona page, the article page, social media page, and then the settings page. And then at the end, I just said, use this tech stack. Make sure it's a modern, responsive UI. So this was the prompt that entered onto Windsurf. And then it came back with the instructions prompt, which I can show you guys. And here we have the final instructions file. And you can see how I've split this up into all the different features. And I'll go through that in just a second. So similar to the other application, at the start, we have the overview. So this is the overview of the app and what we're trying to do. Make sure to use Anthropics for the LLM model, Supabase integration, onboarding form for the company, setting up of the company persona, and then generating articles, social media posts, and also token-based generations, and will be managed and tracked, and Stripe payment integration. And this is the tech stack that we wanted to use. And let's go through and explain all the different features and how I've broken it down. And because we're using Supabase for not just the authentication, but also storage of the data and the personas and the different content that we generate, we really need to make sure that this is all fleshed out from the start so that when it comes to building the rest of the features, everything is set in place, all the tables are there and is set out correctly. So as you can see, we have the 4 tables here. So we have the profiles table, and this has the user's details. We've got the personas, and this is where we keep company persona and a content style. And then we have the content itself. So every article we generate, every social media post we generate, we save it into the database. And finally, we have the tokens table to track the usage for each user. And I can show you what this looks like inside of Supabase. And so here I've got my Supabase setup. So inside of the table editor, we have the 4 different tables. So let's start off with the personas. And this is where we keep all of the information about our persona. The first one was just basically a test for my agency. And the second one is the one we just did for Airbnb. And then we also have the profiles. I've got my one just as a test email, and then Jon Snow. And then we just got to created that and updated that columns. And then we have the content table. And this is where we store all of the content that we generate. So you can see a bunch of data here. And the content type is LinkedIn or Twitter. And also we can have the article. So it's all saved into one table. And finally, we have the tokens. So for each user, they have the available tokens and they have the total tokens that they purchased, and then the usage and what they're on, and then the last purchase date. So to actually get started and set up Supabase, we have to go and set up a project at supabase.com. We basically just create a new project, give it a name, give it a password and a region, and then you'll be given the project URL and the anonymous key from Supabase dashboard. You just have to copy that into your .env.local file, and that's how we connect our application with Supabase. And what we have to do is that once we tell Windsurf to start with the first feature and implement the first feature, after it goes and builds all the different files, we actually generate the schema file for your database, and this will be located under Supabase, migrations, and then it'll be called initial schema. So it will look something like this. And this is basically SQL code to create all the different tables and all the different fields and columns and some policies and functions. So what we have to do is basically copy this whole code here and go into your SQL dashboard. There's 2 ways to do this. You can either do it through the CLI command line interface, or you can do it through the dashboard. So you can just go into Supabase, and then under SQL editor, you create a new snippet. And this is basically where you paste in your SQL code, and you can have SQL queries here. And you click run at the bottom right. Once you click run, this script will basically build out the whole Supabase database, and we don't have to worry about it. So the second one is just a simple sidebar navigation with all of the different tabs that we want to have: the persona, article, social media, posts, and then the settings tab. And this was a very simple feature that we just added. And yeah, there's not really much more to it. The third feature is where we actually implement the persona tab. So this is where we showcase the persona that the user entered from the onboarding process, where they can modify their pre-filled data, and it's connected with Supabase. So it will pull in everything that they've entered and then give them the option to modify different parts and save it back to the database. Again, this wasn't a hassle to create. It was a quite simple one. Just telling it to build out this feature, and then just if there's any errors, copy and paste the errors, and you'll be able to finish this part. The fourth is where it gets a bit more interesting. So this is where we actually create the article tab for the generations of the articles. So we're telling it to create a new article page and all of the different inputs and the drop down menus, making sure that we use Anthropic's Claude API to generate the inputs. And here you can see how I've sort of referenced the document section. So it will know to go down to the documentation for Anthropic's API data. And this is where I've pasted in an example of an article generation prompt, giving it the prompt and then passing it all the different variables that we want it to use to generate the article. Once it created that, it was still not capturing the tokens. So I added this prompt here, basically asking it to handle the response correctly and make sure we capture the token usage. And I've given it also another example inside of the prompt itself that I've taken from the documentations of Anthropic's Claude website. And this basically fixed the issue. So now we're able to actually see the response with the tokens we used for that generation. And then we capture everything to be able to pass it back to the database. And then we were on to the fifth feature where we do the social media post generation. This is very similar to the article one. So it creates a social media page, fetches the previously generated articles from a drop-down menu, and then allows users to select an article, define the post preferences, and then click generate to generate the post. And this one was also quite simple and straightforward. It didn't cause too many errors. And then we built out the tokens management feature to track the token usage and show the balance of the user inside of the settings page. And for this one, I'm pretty sure I just said yes. So I asked it to create the feature, and then I think most of the stuff were pretty much completed. So I just asked it to add the settings page to view the token balance and also only allow users to generate articles or posts if they have enough balance. And this was a modification because initially it set the default token to be 100,000. So I dropped that down to 10,000. I told it to keep in mind that the users purchase more tokens, so the limit may change because it thought it was a hard limit. So I told it this is something that's coming up in the future. We haven't actually implemented this yet, and it managed to fix that problem. And then for the final feature, it was the Stripe integration. So this one is where we allow the users to purchase additional tokens via Stripe. And the key here is that basically I just pasted a bunch of the snippets from the documentation for using Stripe, and this really helped out a lot, and it made the whole process a lot more smoother when it came to generating the code. So when it comes to Stripe side of things, we need to obviously have an account. So what we basically have to do is create a new product and then give it a name and description. And for that same product, you can just have 3 different price tiers and make sure they're just all one-off, not recurring prices. And for every price, you're able to click on that price and copy the ID of that price. And that's what we'll be using to connect with the application. So I'll show you guys how that looks like in just a second. But essentially, I've just told Cascade, this is the different packages that I have. So make sure to update all the areas where the packages are displayed because it made some default values, which I didn't want to use. And I wanted to make sure it uses the one that I've actually created inside of Stripe. So if we go to our .env file, so we have the example file here. First, we had the Supabase. And this is the URL, the anonymous key, and then the service role key. And for Anthropics, we've got our Anthropics API key. And then when it comes to Stripe, so we have a few different keys here. So we have the secret key, the webhook key, and this is the webhook that we set up to redirect back onto our application. And this is usually a public URL. However, I'll show you how to set this up for localhost testing. And this is what I was referring to here of all the different packages and the price IDs for each package. So to set up our webhook endpoint inside of Stripe, you have to go to Stripe's dashboard, and basically inside of your Stripe account, we make sure you're in the test mode because you want to make sure it all works first before copying it over to the live version. So once inside test mode, go to developers, webhooks, and this is where we add an endpoint. So click on add endpoint and you give it a name. So this has to be a public URL for it to work. So this is basically your application's URL once you deploy it. So we can just say social scribe.agenix.ai. We don't need to give an example, that's fine. And then we select the event. So the event that we want to listen to is checkout session completed. So make sure you check this one here. And this basically listens for when the checkout has been completed. Make sure the version matches the one that you're using. So I'm using the latest one, so I'm going to pick that one. And then we just click on add endpoint. I'm not going to actually do that because I already have that set up. And that will give you the webhook secret key, and we paste that onto our .env file. And then when it comes to local development, what we have to do is actually install Stripe CLI command line interface. So if you're on Mac, you just use brew install Stripe, and then we authenticate by using this command here into our command line. And this will take you to Stripe's webpage to just log in, and then that's how we authenticate. So what we have to do is actually forward the webhook because it's not actually live yet. So we forward the webhook that we've created onto our localhost URL. And this is how we do that via this command here. So we have to keep this running every time we're running the application. So as you can see in my terminal here, so I've got two different terminals. One's for running the application. This is the node here. And the second one is the Stripe. And this is running the Stripe webhook URL forwarding. And make sure you stick to the end because I'll also be showing how we can minimize the different errors that we get and make sure we get Windsurf to actually listen to the instructions and speed up the process of development. So the final thing I did was just final UI improvements. So I used this prompt to, just have it look a bit nicer, and then added a loading UI animation for when articles were being generated. And then of course, as always, we have to test it, save it, and then commit to the repo. And then to prepare for deployment, we have to run this command here. So let's just do that now. Let's close off the server, restart it by running this command. And what this does is just go through and builds out the whole application and ensures there are no errors when we're building it for the production environment. And the first time you do this, you're bound to get a bunch of different errors. And most of the time, they're very simple TypeScript errors. And all you have to do is just copy it, paste it onto Cascade, and just say, please fix this. And you can I've actually tested this by pasting 3 or 4 different errors because you're going to get a bunch of different errors. So you can copy a bunch, about 3 or 4 max, I would say, and then ask it to fix it. Here I've only just got one because I've gone through this process a few times. But yeah, you're most likely going to find a bunch of different errors. Cool. So all it did was modify one little line. So let's just check it out. It's just an apostrophe. We had to basically escape it. Accept all changes. And let's run that command again. npm run build. Just make sure there are no errors at all. All right. So this time we finished with no errors. You can see everything is all good. It built out all the different pages. And at this stage, we just want to save this checkpoint and commit all the different changes. I'm just going to say ready to deploy, which this is the second time I'm doing this. You can see it down here as well. And then there's a bunch of fixing of errors, but it's always really good practice to commit as often as possible whenever the application is at a good state where everything's been tested and it's working. Sync changes, and we're basically ready to deploy. So just quickly, we have the complete prompt here. So this will also be added to the masterclass file. Now we're ready to deploy our application. So you have a few different options that you can choose. I like Railway. It's very simple, very cheap. You can also use like stuff like Vercel or Render. Railway, just for me, it's really good. And they also have a really cheap hobby plan of just $5 a month for small, simple projects. And this is basically the one that we're going to use today. So we start off by going to railway.app. So it's just simple railway.app. And we click on deploy a new project. So you want to log in with your GitHub account so that it's all synced in. So what we want to do is deploy from GitHub repo. So select this. And here we select the repository of our application. So mine was called Social Scribe. Click that. And we want to add the variables because this is important. So all of the environment variables that we had in our local file, we want to copy and paste those onto here. And a simple way to do this is just using the raw editor. So click on raw editor and we just copy and paste everything that we have inside of our local end file. Just copy and paste it into the raw editor. So let me just quickly do that with my real data. And once you've done that correctly, you should see something like this. All the different variables and the API keys all hidden. And go back to deployment. So you can see that deployment is in progress. So at the moment it's doing the build that we basically did locally when we did npm run build. It's doing this here and making sure it compiles the whole application and then it will deploy it. So we can see that there was actually an error. And this is good because we can troubleshoot together and see what the problem was. So literally what I'm going to do is copy everything up until where it was working because the error is somewhere here. Then go back to our Windsurf, start a new chat and say, I got this error when building the application in production. Please analyze the code base and find the root cause of this. And then I'll just reference the whole source code and let's see what it comes up with. All right, so it's saying the Stripe secret key is not set in the environment variables. So let me quickly check. So it's saying the Stripe secret key is not here, but it might be because we might have taken a little bit longer to put all the variables before it managed to build the application. So what I'm just going to do is retry. I'm not even going to change anything. So I'm just going to do, so I've actually not changed anything. I'm just going to redeploy it because I have a feeling it was just because the variables weren't set before it managed to reach the point of checking the environment variables when it's doing the build. So let's just give it another run. I'm pretty sure it should be okay. It's looking good. built successfully. Amazing. Let's close this. So it's just deploying. Let's just give it a second. Deployment successful. So let's see. If we go to settings, this is where we can connect our custom domain or generate a domain. And now we have a public domain. So if we click this, oh, would you look at that? The application is now public. And if we scroll to the bottom, you also have some variables that you can change, like the region of where you want the service to be hosted. You can limit the amount of CPU and memory that the application uses. And there's a bunch of stuff here that you can sort of mess around with, but we don't really need to worry about any of that. The application is running, it's live, and everything's good to go. You also have the metrics tab, and this is like to keep track of the CPU and the memory of your application. So if we go to the 1 hour, obviously this is just recently deployed, so we're not going to see much going on here. Very simple, very easy way to deploy our application, and that's all we have to do. And finally, we have the LangLink application. So this was a real-time translation messenger, and it was a project for a client who wanted to build out a quick MVP to test the idea out. So let's show you guys a quick demo. I've got my test account here. So you have a profile page where you have your name, your email, and this is where you set your preferred language. So I want to talk in English and receive the translations in English. We can also toggle the theme of light and dark. I quite like the dark theme. Then we also have the contacts. So this is where we can search users by name, by email. So for example, we can do like Jack search, and we can see Jack here. And then we can add him as a friend. We can see the pending invites. So we have the list of all the contacts that we have, and then we can start chats with them. And finally, we've got the messaging tab, and this is all very dynamic and mobile friendly, because the idea here is that it needs to be used for mobile as well. So it's very mobile friendly. And basically the idea here is that we're able to chat with the different contacts. So we send the message. Our message is sent in both the language that we set and also the translation. Oh yeah, so Jack previously had this language set as English, and then I changed it to Spanish. So he sends this message, and this is what I receive in English. And it's able to send out the messages in both my language and the other user's language. So we can quickly type in a message. This video is very long, and you see how fast that was. So it sends the message and it translates it. So yeah, really nice app. The guy really loved it. And let's actually show you guys how I built this using Windsurf and go through the instructions file. Right, so we have the instructions file here for the LangLink application. And as you can see, it always follows the same format. So we start with the project overview. So they want to build out a web application to facilitate real-time translation messages between users, user authentication, responsive. It has a contacts list, real-time communication updates, technologies used, Next.js, development, Supabase for the backend, OpenAI chat model for the translation functionality. I could have used like Google API for the translation, but I just wanted to keep it simple for this MVP. So I went ahead and just used OpenAI's chat model for translation. And it worked really well. And it even handles like the emojis, which is great. So if, for example, if you send an emoji, it's able to pass that on after the translation. So it actually worked in our favor. So for the functionalities and how I split up all the different features, I started with the user authentication as always. So I told it what the users are able to do. So they want to sign up, log in and manage their profile management page for managing their preferred language and the profile settings. And yeah, just use Supabase to implement everything. Next, we had the messaging interface, and this was basically the chunk of the application. So we wanted to make sure it looks nice, it looks presentable, and also the functionality needs to work really well. And the main idea here is that we want to use Supabase real-time messaging capabilities. And this is how you see that it was really fast when it comes to sending the messages. The user will also receive the messages instantly. And this was very key, obviously, because it's a messaging platform. For the UI, we really needed to make sure it's mobile friendly, clear separation between sent messages and received messages. It needs to be very clean. So I spent a lot of time, making sure the UI is consistent across the platform. And here at the bottom again, I've referenced the documentation section. So it goes and checks the documentation, where I pasted in a snippet of the documentation just to show an example of how this can look like. And this is basically the system prompt that I used. I said, you're a translator specializing in translating from the user's language to the other user's language. Translate the following text, only return the translation and nothing else. And this play worked really well. And then came the contacts list. So we have the page where users can search, like I showed you. They can search for users and then add them, send a request, accept the request, and also initiate chats with them. And again, this was very simple and straightforward, using Tailwind for the UI, fetch and display registered users from Supabase. and implement search functionality and chat initiation. So this was also a very straightforward feature. And then came the translation service. So this is actually sending of the messages to OpenAI's model and returning the response. And at the bottom again, I've referenced the chat model documentation. And you notice that most of these were basically created in a previous feature. However, we always want to build up on it and make sure it's done in the right way. And by asking it to refer back to the instructions file and actually double check and make sure everything has been done is a good way to go about it. And here's also a good example. So the real-time communication, I'm pretty sure that it was done the first time around, but making sure, we check in again and making sure it's actually using real-time messaging and updates, and it's using Supabase, just to make sure we're actually implementing the functionality that we want. And finally, at the end, we just really optimized for mobile and making sure, like I mentioned earlier, the UI really adjusts seamlessly between the various different screens, and it's very consistent throughout the whole application. And that was pretty much it for this application. So you can see it really doesn't take that much. And this was a really fun project to do. So now let's look at the best practices and tips. Because if you spend any time with building applications in Windsurf or Cursor or Bolt.new or any of the other applications, there's always bound to be errors. And what I'm going to share with you guys here is a few different concepts and things that sort of stumbled across while building applications with Windsurf and spending so many hours building these applications. And some might be straightforward, or you might think they might not be necessary, but they do really make a difference. And some of these are obviously covered while building out the application earlier in the video. However, we're just going to go through everything. So starting off, we just want to really make sure that we have a well-defined, clear instructions file, and making sure that we keep referring back to it constantly throughout the building of the project so that the model is aware of the context of the project. Because if the chat window gets too large, it starts forgetting what the project is about, starts to hallucinate and messes up the code. So next we have the splitting of the features. So like I've shown you guys in the different instructions file, we want to really split up the different features in a way that they build up on each other so that we can build one task at a time, one feature at a time, test it, make sure it works before moving on to the next one. The third tip is adding documentation snippets into the instructions file, because this really does help improve the accuracy, and especially when we have different versions of documentations and we really want to pick a specific one. So this is always good practice to paste that into the instructions file, making sure we know exactly which version of a library we're actually building. The fourth one is breaking up the chat window, making sure we always start new conversations, re-explaining the instructions, so referring back to the instructions file for every new chat that we create. Because every time we start a new window, Windsurf won't have memory of what the project is, so we want to make sure we re-reference the instructions file. And number 5 is keeping the app running. So the way that Windsurf works is that it actually implements the code for you. So it actually makes the changes and updates the code. So every time we make an update to the code, we can have the application actually running and test out the features that it just added, make sure they all work before we actually go back into Windsurf and accept the changes. And number 6 is straightforward. It's just using the image upload feature that was just released for debugging purposes. And I shown you guys a demo of this earlier, and we can ask it for improvements of the UI, or when we start in a new project, we can showcase a UI that we like and asking it to build something that's similar to it. Number 7 is accepting parts of the generated code and rejecting others. So we don't have to accept all the changes. And it's always good practice to review the changes that the model did and make sure that it's not messing up the code. So if it starts to touch parts of the code that it shouldn't have, you can just reject those parts and then accept everything else. And that saved a lot of time for me. So for number 8, for any minor updates to the code, we want to add this at the end of the prompt. And it's really helped make sure other parts of the code are not changed. So just by adding a simple sentence at the end, make sure to check the files before building anything. Do not mess up any of the existing functionality, especially when we're starting a new chat. This seems to minimize the hallucinations. And number 9, and I've spoken about this, is after every feature, we complete it and test it and make sure that it's okay, making sure that we actually commit the changes to GitHub, to our repo. And this acts like a save checkpoint so that if we mess up the code completely, we can always have something to go back to, a safe state of the application that we can roll back to and then try again. And finally, when facing errors from hell and you're bashing your head against the wall, asking Windsurf to fix errors back and forth, and it doesn't seem to actually fix the problem, I've always referred back to ChatGPT's O1 model and basically just given it the code saying, this is my code, this is what I'm trying to do, and these are the errors that I'm getting. It's a very simple prompt, and I just send that, and every time we manage to actually fix the problem. So just keep that in mind. And that will be the end of the Windsurf Masterclass. I hope you guys found this helpful. It's a really exciting time to be in the AI space right now. And especially if you're an AI agency owner, you can see the power of this. You can start building out applications for your client. You can start having something that's a bit more tangible instead of just automations and workflow that are all in the back end. You can have something in the front end that looks nice and present it to your clients. And I'm excited to use Windsurf more and carry on building. So if you have any ideas, drop them down in the comments below. And if you're a business owner or you have an idea that you'd like to build and you want to work with us, I'll put the link to my calendar down below. Feel free to reach out and we can hop on a call and discuss how we can help you. And if you want access to the masterclass document or the complete code, I'll be putting that inside of my school community, so I'll link that down in the description below. And if you found this helpful, please hit that like and subscribe button. With that being said, thank you very much and I'll see you in the next one.